Hello and welcome everyone to episode 51 of the Summoning Hour. We're getting some reverb on the other end. But this week's guest is Scott Zackman formerly of Rutgers Esports as the competitive director and now esports consultant. Uh, Hi Scott.
Hey, we're cool. How's everybody doing? My name is Scott Zackman. Yep, I am was the competitive director for Rutgers Esports. My tenure has finished as of, I think, 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago. We do this selection process where we actually get to choose our successors. So YJ Shin is my successor, and I'm very excited to see where she will bring the competitive director position into the future. It's a new position, so we'll see how it goes. But it's always going to be interesting. Rutgers Esports is a very interesting place.
And that is why you are back, so that we can talk about some of those stories and the lessons learned from them. Specifically because last time you and I talked, we started talking about the Red Wedding stories of at least Rutgers Esports. It might have involved some other schools as well, but I was really intrigued by the amount of like behind the scenes attitude that idea of Red Wedding stories entails. So I mean, whenever you're ready, let's just jump right in and like start with that first lesson and first story that came to mind.
Yeah, sure. So I think the first one is it's a pretty baseline thing to know. I'm pretty sure that everybody who is involved with the collegiate program knows this, but completely student-run organizations can be really petty. um, if you, even and it's not just esports, right? This is any sort of organization. And this is kind of where the first, like, I guess, story comes in. Is This is 2016. We are preparing for, I believe it's the Fireside Open. It's the first Fireside Open that we're going to be doing. Um, Up until that point, in 2014 and 15, there was only one large tournament. But this was the first time that we were going to have two, and this is the first of two. Um, and we had a big old list of things that we wanted to do this time. Right? Is now at this point we've grown as an organization. We have 14 members on our board, presidents and vice presidents of each game included, and there's a list of things that we have to get done, like flyers and all this other stuff that we haven't really done in the past, but those went fine. But it's a lot of work getting a lot of stuff set. A lot of people are, I guess, like frustrated and worn out just getting all of these things that we've never done before. Like graphics, like graphic designs at work was like Jackie was working on that for a solid month, getting all the graphics done for the event, making sure everything gets printed, all that kind of stuff. And it was bad. Everybody, I remember one of the first meetings right before we were about to have the actual event. It was rough. We were at each other's throats for little things. And that's kind of where it just started, right? Is like this little tiny seeds of being frustrated with each other over things that aren't really necessarily a big deal. And this 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 next day, right, was like the day before the Fireside Open. We're like, okay, Costco run, who's in? We gotta go get food for the event. Gamers love snacks. Everybody loves snacks. We got to get something. And I think there was 4 people or 5 people that went to Costco to go pick out like a bunch of snacks. We had a relatively decent budget, I think $150 or something like that for getting food. And I saw a Snapchat of one of the guys, and I'm to blame here for this a little bit, for starting the fire, but a Snapchat of guys who are like, Raisin Bran, let's get it. And I'm like, gamers don't like Raisin Bran. Nobody wants Raisin Bran for their snack of choice, and they got a lot of Raisin Bran. I'm telling you, they got like a box and a half of Raisin Bran, and a small non-issue. Right, this is the smallest non-issue that I could probably think about, but this thing blew up. We had 2 other people in chat be like, "Why? Can I curse?"
Yeah, sure, go
Right.
for it.
Um, One of the guys, I think he was like, which one of you fucking idiots bought Raisin Bran? Like, nobody wants that. Nobody's gonna eat that trash. It's a waste of money. How could you? And it snowballed into this huge issue where, like, I think that night we had a meeting, and I swear it was so close to being a fist fight. People were freaking out at each other, like, why the fuck would you get Raisin Bran? This is such a petty, stupid choice to make. Like, why would you do this without consulting everybody? And at the end of the day, it's not a big deal, right? It's just Raisin Bran. It's
It's
not.
cereal for a one time event that you guys can do again and do something better. And but cereal,
Exactly. And this is one of the issues is like, this huge issue came out of something so small and mediocre because we let somebody make their own decision on what to get. And we had never done that before, right? Before that, everybody voted on everything, right? Raise your hands. Who's doing this, what's getting done here. and and that was like our first taste of somebody making a decision on their own. And some people were like, whatever. And other people, a majority of people were like, no, this isn't okay. Or yes, we want Raisin Bran because it's healthy. It's a healthy snack, and freaking out and really defending their position. And it raised a lot of other issues, right? Which is, we had people actually leave over this or two people leave for, say, about a couple weeks. They weren't really involved anymore because like it raises other issues of within the organization. It's like, well, you should have came if you weren't so lazy and all this other kind of stuff. And then they're defending their position like, hey, I'm busy too. I have my own stuff that I'm doing. And it kind of just snowballed out of control. Um, and I guess like the lesson behind that we learned, and definitely that I learned, it's difficult learning that lesson. That students can be petty, but it's also difficult learning that lesson to just like give up control. Um, to let somebody else kind of handle it, whether or not you like that decision, that's on you, right? You have to choose your own outcome in that situation. Are you going to be okay with that, or are you not going to be okay with that? And it goes larger than Raisin Bran, obviously. Like Jackie made her own decisions on the graphics, and this conversation could have happened the exact same way, right? Oh, we don't like the graphic that way. That doesn't make sense. But again, it happened to be over Raisin Bran, over some like non-issue, but it's a small thing, and it shows that again, students are petty. It's a hard lesson to learn. You know, let everybody do their job and do their job how they see fit. Because if you're micromanaging everything, you're not necessarily watching out for the bigger things that are more important. Because that whole conversation the night before is directed around Raisin Bran and not important stuff like when are we getting there, or like who's doing most of the setup, like who's doing what when we get there, and all that kind of stuff.
yeah, that's definitely one lesson I can even vouch for is like as you get into leadership roles and you start delegating work to people, you can't just follow them and tell them what work to do because then it's just going to be done your way and not necessarily the way that you need that person to grow and learn how to make those decisions on their own, or make sure it's kind of validating your training of them. And I can see in a student organization where there's a finite amount of time, there's maybe not even like a real strong hierarchical emphasis on roles or anything, that people are going to have to just kind of be peers together and be okay with what someone else's decision is. But that's not always the easiest pill to swallow, especially when you get people who are really passionate about the community or the topic, or like trying to put together an event like that. That I could see that having a mounting amount of pressure as time went on getting ready for it.
Yeah, and it was definitely a lesson learned. The next story is something that kind of builds on top of that a little bit. Now, this is towards the end of the year. This is towards, actually, I think this is after the Scarlet Classic. So this is like after most of our events are done, um, towards the summer. Um, and it's a little similar, not really. I'm actually, it's a little similar, but this one's a little bit more dramatic. um, so the lesson here is, you should always have a third party in control of your passwords, and keeping them out of the hands of like members. This is actually when we first had our Systech like quote unquote
Oh
director,
no.
and we were starting to like really try that stuff out. where everybody has a designated role within the organization. And this one is interesting because we actually definitely learned our lesson here where, we locked everything behind a third account where multiple people have the password and like we have an outside party kind of controlling it. Um, and this is where it's like super important to like do this. We had a glory hound again. I'm not going to say his name just because it was pretty bad. We had a glory hound who pretty much felt slighted all year. And he didn't think he was given enough control over certain aspects of the organization, and like not utilized or not appreciated for his work, which honestly could be the case. Like, don't get me wrong. Again, student-run organizations, and especially as young as we were getting into this, people definitely were slighted. We had a lot of people leave after that first year because they felt like their input wasn't enough. Um, and we'll touch on that in a little bit, but he was one of those glory hound types, though. This is an added extra bonus on top of him feeling slighted. Um, so he got in an argument with me about player contracts and having. I didn't at that time. I didn't want players to sign contracts that required them to go to certain events. I didn't think it was fair to them if they couldn't make it and then they were kicked off the team, which we
Seems
could change.
reasonable.
Yeah, and it was reasonable, and it's something that could change, obviously. And I wanted to change. I wanted that to be a non-issue. And I was fighting my case, and as people in my organization will know, when I fight my case, I am loud and direct and to the point, and I make my point very clear. And sometimes it comes off as super aggressive, which I understand, but it's also how I get my point across, which is that's that. Um, this guy was just trying to kind of get involved and relevant, and raise his voice back at me, and um, said things that were just disrespectful, and I started like yelling. I was now yelling into my mic over a Discord. If we were in person, I would have gotten in this kid's face and like it would have been bad. Um, but we ended up like arguing over this for no reason, and literally both of us were like kicked out from the meeting because it was that bad. It was like we were just freaking out at each other, like not okay. And this is something that comes into play where throughout the year, I have people that I secretly go to behind other, not behind the backs of other people, but like if I want something done, I know that just arguing over the course of one meeting isn't going to make sense. You kind of have to have people on your side before that. So I'll talk to people beforehand, before the meeting. Hey, this is what I want. What do you think? Does this make sense? And they're like, oh, yeah, okay. And then that's kind of like creating alliances before we go into the meeting where we vote on stuff and talk on things. Um, and like so, luckily they kind of finished up my point. We tabled the contracts. That wasn't a thing. Um, we actually still don't have contracts because of similar issues about control and how much control Rutgers Esports actually has over different clubs. Um, but that's a second thing. In any case, he freaks out about the jersey and all this other stuff. So he gets kicked out of the meeting. He takes that as he gets kicked out of the organization, and goes in and changes all of the passwords to all of our different social media, emails, all that kind of stuff.
Oh no.
So email is the biggest thing, right? For us is that is our lifeline to the outside world of sponsorships, following up with sponsorships, specifically after the Scarlet Classic, which is huge, right? We have 20 sponsorships and we have over, I don't know, $15,000-$20,000 of recaps that we have to do, or we won't get funding that next year from those same sponsors. So huge issue was created. What ended up happening was like they reached out to the guy and he's like, yeah, I'll meet with you guys. Like, I didn't know I was supposed to change the password. We kind of believed him at that point. Um, two guys from our team sat down with him at like a public place to discuss this because like it was a huge issue, and he's like, yeah, I'll change the password, all this other kind of stuff. Like, I apologize. He went back, changed the password, and then like long seething letter of like just being nasty to people, and then left the Discord. We got in touch with him, and he's like, yeah, this isn't okay, and all this other kind of stuff. I think he sent a threatening, or he said something threatening, and at this point we kind of knew, like, hey, this guy's a little out there. Like, we want to make sure that we have all our bases covered. Let's record the conversation. So luckily, the conversation was recorded, and and not to his, like, we didn't tell him because legally we didn't have to. We figured that out beforehand. I was like, hey, if we're gonna do this, do it right. I don't want to get in trouble if like it's a huge issue, and luckily we did. Um, and he said stuff like, hey, I still have the password. I'm gonna change it back. Like, you guys are dicks. Like, I can't believe all this other bullshit has happened. You guys never gave me any control over anything. I hate this. And then um, he changes the passwords back again, but this time, like, we had somebody, or he tried changing the passwords back again, but we had somebody change the password on him, so like there was no issue. He said he had tried it or something. I don't remember I wasn't privy to the entire conversation. I just read the audio or heard the audio log, and he leaves the organization. And a week later, we get a email that says a seizure of, God, what is it? It was like a seizure of audio logs because of, God, he was interning at like a big security company. Again, I won't name which one. I think the biggest, largest like weapon slash security manufacturing company you could think of. Um,
Oh, jeez.
and yeah, and he's like, oh, like they're sending this seizure note. Like, I need this audio log, and you guys need to delete it, and all this other stuff. And we actually called him on his bullshit. We actually called the company up, and they're like, yeah, we don't have any of that information. He was supposed to be interning with them that summer. He's like, and like, we called them. We're like, hey, do you guys actually need this audio log? Like, that's not okay. Um, and they're like, no, he's interning this summer and like all this other stuff. And he ended up getting removed from his internship because he had created a fake email from the account that of like of the security company. Like this is like cybersecurity stuff where he created a fake email and then created this account to send it to us. Um, and forged all these credentials to try and get this audio log from us. And he ended up obviously not getting that internship after we
Yeah.
discussed it with the company. Um, and then after that, again, it doesn't end there. After that, we get
Can't
over
he
the
give up?
summer.
Can't he
I
give
know.
up?
It was bad. It was bad because the next thing he does is he goes to Rutgers, and he says that, um, God, it was a cease and desist. We got a cease and desist because he had told Rutgers University that we were hazing in our club. And we were flabbergasted, right? We were at this point of like, we have parties and do crazy stuff, which is actually the next story that comes up. But like, we would never haze, and I don't think he was ever at like one of our parties. Um, they got out of hand, but in a good way, not in like a, oh, this is inappropriate kind of way, but in like a bunch of college kids who rarely drink with their friends kind of way. And he had this huge issue with it, and then he went to Rutgers, sent us cease and desist, and then we actually had to plead our case, and then we had the audio log, luckily, and everything was settled and good to go. But again, moral of the story here: share your passwords with a third party and have them control things, because you never know who's going to go rogue. Because again, up until the point that he did it, we didn't really have an inkling that he was capable or would want to do that, and we didn't even really think about it. Um, so yeah, that's that. That's that story. I have one more, and then I'm gonna kind of discuss like, I guess what I was talking about earlier, which is like alliances, secret alliances behind each other's back, to get stuff done, kind of. Um, Give me one
Yeah.
second.
Yeah, no
Let
worries.
me
I,
find.
and I can talk to that point a little bit. And I mean, it's not so much as it should be treated like secret alliances as it is being able to build those relationships and build trust with people so that you can have those candid one-on-one conversations and understand where everyone's feelings are at. Being able to go to someone and say, I am feeling this way about this topic. How are you feeling? Gives so much more credibility to that relationship. And even if they disagree with you, you can talk it out. And then when you go into that meeting with other people, you, even though you're on opposing sides of the topic, you guys, or the two of you, can actually be talking amicably together and being more cordial together, even if it is a little bit of a hot button topic. So it's not so much as it is like secret alliances as it is like really understanding the topic. If you are both on the same side, then you can go in together and be like, I have an ally who's going to speak with me, and I'm not alone. I know a lot of people get nervous either in meetings or public speaking where they don't want to say their opinion because they don't want to be the odd person out. So having those conversations ahead of time can really help benefit and motivate you to actually be more of a part of the conversation. I mean, the one thing you have to think of when you're in these meetings, or any meeting really, is that you were invited or you were able to attend, and you that gives you a voice at the table, and you have every right to use that voice no matter what your opinion is, as long as it's in a shared respectful way. So I just kind of want to turn down that like secret alliances. It's not like games of Survivor or anything like that, but it does play into a little bit of that political play in organizations. But it's it gets political when people start using it the wrong way or like really abusing it. But there's nothing wrong with those side conversations just to feel out how the conversation's going to go ahead of time.
Exactly. And for me personally, it was a learning experience because I didn't really know that until I went in there and I was like, hey, if I want to get anything done and I want somebody on my side to help, I have to have those discussions outside of the meetings and kind of discuss where I'm coming from and where I'm feeling. Um, and again, there's no like threatens. It's not like I would go out and threaten people like, "Hey, you got to vote for this." But like when you plead your case differently out of a meeting, it's so much easier to have that discussion and get them on your side than it is during the meeting, because that you have the time to kind of really construct what you want to say. Um,
Yeah, and I mean, up to this point, unless you were in similar clubs in like high school or in early college, I wouldn't expect anyone to learn that lesson of how to manage the political side of conversation in an organization until you were out of college. I mean, I that's when I learned it was after I left and I started working in different companies, and it's like, how are people going about talking about these things, or why aren't people saying things when they're saying other things outside of the meeting room? It's like, oh, they're playing the game, um, which just comes from a more of a toxic environment, anyways. So
Yeah, and I was gonna say, I was not the best with it. Sometimes I would go to people that I knew be easy to win over in a way. That would kind of be like, okay, I guess I agree with you, Scott. And that wasn't the best play. I think it works, but it's not really. It's not something that I would want to do again. I went to people that I felt that were easy to win over, and would argue my case and be like, "You think that way too, right?" Kind of like really pushing them a little bit harder than I guess I could have or should have. Um, but again, it was a learning process, and like there really were some things that were pretty big that we would vote on, and you really had to have somebody like, "Hey, this is what I want. Like, let's talk about this." And at the end of the day, again, we lost people because of that kind of stuff, and that was unfortunate because people didn't do their alliances correctly. They had an idea, had nobody else to back them up, and then they were like shot down. And that's just how it worked. The idea might have been fine, but if not everybody agreed on it, then like there's no way that stuff gets changed, I guess. Um, and again, it's kind of harsh, but that was the reality of when we were there. Is you know everybody gets a voice, but some voices are louder
yeah.
and more or joined. So the next one is something that is touched upon and often not agreed upon in organizations, especially businesses, is dating your coworkers or having a relationship with your coworkers. It's kind of an unspoken rule at Rutgers Esports, as it is in a lot of other organizations. That's like, don't date your coworkers. I firmly believe that should be the case. There are definitely people that obviously disagree strongly with that. Um, for me, it was like I would never do it. I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to be involved in that way, and I think it keeps it so that nobody's doing favors for the other person because they're in a relationship, and that's for me is like the biggest thing is like I don't want that to be the case. You know, if you have ideas, you should fight for them the correct way. Granted, the way that I was doing it with Secret Alliances wasn't necessarily the correct way, but something similar to that, which is, fight your case and have it heard and win people over that way instead of just being like, oh, Nancy over there is correct. I'm going to vote with her because we're secretly seeing each other, which I didn't like at all. And we actually had a case of that. And like we had a couple of cases of that where people were treated not unfairly, but they were given opportunities or they were helped out in ways that were not appropriate because they were dating somebody that had power. Um, One specific example, I guess. I'm just trying to think of. There's one specific one is if somebody's going to be kicked out of the organization, um, that's like important to follow through with, regardless of who it is. If they're not doing the work that's necessary, or if they're butting heads with too many people, that's not okay. Like that's something that just doesn't float well. And if they're fighting people over stupid small stuff, that was the case. And that was the case in this story. Is we had somebody who should have been removed from their position, wasn't doing the work that was required of them, but stayed because they were dating somebody else on the board. Um, and that kind of stuff to me is just not okay because it just creates this issue of, you know, dead weight. And like when you're emerging as like a club, you don't need that or want that. And I think there is a way that you can date somebody and not have that happen. But I've never seen it work at Rutgers Esports. And I've rarely seen it work in the business place or in the business model. Um, and that's that. But so to embellish a little bit, I guess, of a different aspect is, as I was talking about before, we would have parties, Rutgers Esports parties. And again, no hazing or anything like that, but it was like they would get out of hand, like I would take off my shirt. I was like 200 pounds at that time. I would take off my shirt. I'd lay on the table and people would take like belly shots off of me, and it's like weird, like crazy stuff that like it's really because here are people that normally don't go out to drink or drink with their friends. They're playing video games just like I was. I kind of brought this to them because I was not in that aspect. I played lacrosse. I had never really played video games before. I like drinking and hanging out with my friends, and like everything just just stacked on top of each other, got more and more absurd. Like people were kissing other people, like just like and like on dares, not like just because they wanted to, but like we would do like crazy weird stuff that like got really absurd and inappropriate to a degree. Um, and stuff like that is okay to a degree because I think it lets loose a lot of inhibitions, or your inhibitions are kind of like let loose, right? And that's good to hear, but at the same time, you got to be careful because people also said stuff that they might not have said if they had not been drinking. And I think one of the things it was funny is like there's one guy who'd never drank before, like ever, had never had any alcohol. First party, he didn't drink. Second party, I was like, hey man, why don't you take a shot with me? And I pushed him a little bit harder, a little bit of too much pushing, but um, he ended up drinking and drinking healthy that night. Luckily, didn't drink too much. which I'm very glad because I was not paying attention to how much he was drinking. He kind of
Oh
just
no.
handled it himself. Yeah, and just became a completely different person. And luckily, it's somebody that we liked and enjoyed being around. Like it wasn't he wasn't like a dick or anything like that. He actually was just fun, and again, inhibitions are let loose. He put on an air of being a lot more fun to be around. Granted, he was still nice to be around before, but um, it's just one of those things that, like, again, going back to it. I'm sorry, I keep getting off topic here a little bit, but it's hard to kind of legitimize um the dating somebody else when you're in a powerful position. It's hard to be like, oh, I'm not going to give them any special treatment. But when push comes to shove, like you kind of have to once you're in that relationship, because then your relationship falls apart if you don't do that. And there's no easy way to be like, I can't do this because we're dating. you know at the student level, I think you can definitely do it when you're a little bit older and a little bit more and you're comfortable with saying no to somebody like that, especially somebody that you're in a relationship with. But at the student level, nobody I've found has the balls pretty much to tell their significant other, no, I have to remove you from the group because you're not doing anything that you need to be doing. And I guess that's just the lesson out of that one, which is, you know, you have to legitimize your relationships with other people before you legitimatize. I can't say it now. Before you get involved with somebody else, and think that you're not going to give them special treatment, because you will. Everybody does. Everybody did it that dated somebody else, and now it's just an unspoken rule. Like, don't do that anymore at Rutgers Esports.
Yeah, thankfully I haven't had too much problems with that throughout my career, but I mean there are definitely times where it's like I don't know if you would have made that decision had you not been working literally side by side with your significant other. Or did you really think about what was best for the project, or were you thinking about what's best for you and yours at that moment? And like they shared similar takes on everything else and what they were doing in their discipline, but at the same time, even if there is that inkling of suspicion amongst other people, it's starting to create that divide. And like you'd mentioned, like, and very much like the previous story, as soon as someone is compromised and they start becoming toxic and you can't do anything about it, then you're just going to be like splintering the entire group. You have to be able to hire and fire quickly if someone's going to be detrimental to the culture and to the, well, I guess mostly just the culture and all that entails of the group. Like, if you have someone who's just detracting with every interaction, then they shouldn't be there, period. And when you have
Yeah.
that board of uh, authority and then they're not going to get rid of someone because there's significant others on there, you have a much bigger problem on your hands for sure.
And I completely had forgotten too. The guy that was being toxic and like did all this other crazy stuff. He was actually dating somebody on the board at that time who was new, a new member, um, who came in before him or came in after him, didn't know each other obviously, and then they started dating in a relationship, and she just left, like no words, just left the Discord one day. And that's the issue is, she was good at graphic design and like really was like contributing a lot to the organization, and she just left because she has the loyalty to the person that she's in a relationship with. And again, they didn't end up dating forever, but that's one of those issues is like we lost somebody that we could have really utilized and could have really grown at Rutgers Esports because they were in a relationship with somebody else. And I can't blame them for that. I can't blame her for that at all. Or even him for that aspect. It's something that's natural too. If you really find somebody that you click with and enjoy spending time with, that's fine. But you have to make sure that there's boundaries drawn um, before anything else.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think there's, I mean, I guess I'll just touch on the last aspect, which is like the alliance kind of thing is, you know, even just to go back to it for a split second, is it was very, it wasn't exactly what you described before. It wasn't like that, unfortunately. It was pretty, not toxic, but it was like hey, let's make sure that we get this done, or you can't get this done, or I won't vote for you on this thing. Like that was the aspect, and it wasn't just me. Luckily, at that point, I'd feel really bad if it was, but it was a lot. There was a few people that had those decisions where it was, you know, I want to get something done. Do this for me. I'll do this for you. And if it doesn't, then it falls apart and all this other kind of stuff. And again, we had people leave over that because they didn't have their voices heard, and that was the issue. But that's about all I got for most of the red wedding stories. It was very dramatic, and like it's hard to kind of put into words exactly how dramatic, but you can imagine, a bunch of college kids who are coming into their own, with all these big ideas. And like meetings were like 4 hours sometimes. They would go from like 10 to 2 a.m. On like a Sunday, and it was because like we would be arguing about stuff or getting heated over stuff, or just there's opposite times where it'd be like, hey, we're just hanging out, we're having a good time with each other, spending time together, and all that kind of stuff. So it's been a crazy ride with Rutgers Esports. Nowadays, it's not like that at all, right? It's very, very structured. It's Jacob has done a great job of kind of installing that and following through with everybody. So there is no drama. It's really run like a business, and it makes sense now. Where before it was just kind of like an amalgamation of everybody and all everybody's feelings and everybody trying to vie for power and making decisions and stuff like that. And I would like to say that I was good at it, but I don't think it's it's necessarily the best thing to put on my resume. Is kind of making these decisions, because not necessarily forcing people to, but doing it in a way that wasn't as I don't know, ethical. Ethical, I guess, is the word. So yeah, that's my spiel. That's it's there's a lot of lessons learned there. Just to recap, it's like the big one is, you want to make sure that you're not petty, that you make decisions and you let people make decisions. You should always have a third party and control your passwords. That's a huge one. um, and you want to make sure that relationships are taken seriously and legitimatized, and you really just don't hurt the organization overall.
Yeah, I mean, those are things that come with time, and I hope you don't uh, put yourself down too badly about how you might have handled some of those situations. I mean, it's a learning experience for everyone involved, and I mean, just being a student in college and figuring out how you can interact with a club, that's one set of growth, but then with how crazy and upcoming and Wild West esports and collegiate esports are, like everyone's really figuring that out and finding the stuff out about yourself and about how other people work and everything. It's all valuable experience, and there's no better place to learn it than in college when the consequences are minimal. I mean, minimal being your club has Raisin Bran at your event,
Exactly.
or you start learning about when is it legal to record someone. I mean, just to be fair, like my first quarter at my 4 year school, I ended up learning how to get a restraining order, and I had to
There you go.
report someone for having a gun in their room. Like, yeah, that was not what I expected, but you learn all sorts of things when you're at college. So, I mean, that was your experience, and that was mine. So, I mean, don't feel bad about this experience, and I hope you really do feel positive about it overall. And last time we talked, you said esports and the club wasn't always smiles, but just when you're going on about how 4 hour meetings happen because it just felt good to be hanging out with people. Like that
Yeah.
is that is probably the majority of the time, even though it may not have been smiles all the time.
Yeah, and that's the other part, I guess, is, this was a snapshot of 2016. After that, it was much more smooth sailing, but it's pretty much all around. It was a joy to be working with them, and I'm glad I spent my time there. And that was when I think about it, geez, 3 years ago. And I've grown a lot too. I when I was there, I was also like a big into partying, and like I had my own college stuff to go through on my own end that wasn't involved in Rutgers Esports, and I think that played a lot into how I worked at stuff this year. And again, I really hope, and I think I genuinely believe that I did a lot this year to kind of bolster the competitive director position and just the club in general. I've been the face for a lot of articles and the seminar at CSL and all that other cool stuff. So I just think I've learned a lot, and I'm definitely a changed person from back in 2016, where a lot of it was just like a mad dash, Wild West kind of thing. Like who can get to that gold first, And it was internally, and it was also Rutgers Esports is trying to look the best out of all of the colleges that were popping up with new esports programs. Um, and I think we actually have. If it wasn't for 2016, we wouldn't be where we are today. Um, and I think it's just growing pains. Every organization is going to go through a lot of that kind of stuff, which is, you know, it's not always going to be, again, smiles. It's not always going to be smiles and rainbows. It's going to be hard decisions, and people are going to get their feelings hurt, and sometimes you can circumvent that stuff, but often I think if you go through that, it makes you a better person because you can learn from what has happened, and you can learn from the past of what you've gone through.
100%. Now, why don't you tell the audience where they can find you and what you're going to be up to now that you are done with Rutgers Esports?
Awesome. I'm actually pretty excited. This is going to be the first time I really talk about this. So you can find me on Twitter at Scott_Zackman, Zackman. I'm always on there, so please feel free to hit me up if you have any questions. I've been getting a lot there recently. I'm also on LinkedIn at Scott Zackman. Um, but what I'm going to be doing next is pretty interesting. So Rutgers Esports alumni. We have this great program. We have 38 members this year. We had like almost 10 or 11 people graduating and leaving the program. And I'm excited because what I really want to do is utilize those alumni in different consulting positions. So I'm creating Scarlet Esports. It's actually in the works right now. I've bought the domain and everything like that. um, where I'll be utilizing everybody pretty much in the sense, think of like a LinkedIn specifically for Rutgers Esports members, where everybody's going to have a profile, but the ability is there to pretty much pick who you want to work with, right? If you want consulting on an event, we've had an events director that can draw in 900 people, or social media, how do I start social media? We have a social media director that doubled our numbers pretty much. Um, and I want them to be involved in not only the collegiate aspect, but like, hey, if they can throw advice to companies that are starting up or companies that are still working, um, how do we do that, and getting Rutgers Esports involved? And there's a future option there for maybe schools like RIT. I actually have to reach out to Evan today, I think, and kind of see if they want to be involved in this and pretty much create this distinction of like, hey, pick your consultant in a way. If you want somebody that can run an event for 900 people, this is your guy. And making it almost like a LinkedIn kind of way where they can kind of have a little bio and describe what they did and all that kind of stuff. So I'm excited for that. And then I also have some other stuff in the works, but we'll see where it goes.
That's awesome. Well, good luck with those adventures, and I look forward to hear how it goes and keep me in the loop on if there's any coverage or new growth with that. I'm happy to boost the signal.
Awesome. Or cool. Thank you for having me. This has always been a pleasure.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining me this early Saturday morning.
Yeah, I know. I woke up at 10 minutes before we were supposed to do this.
Just enough time. You were on time. That's all I ask. You were great.
Thank you. All right. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me again.
Yep, I appreciate it. And keep in touch. Let's keep talking, see how things go.
Sounds good.
All right, stream. That's it for me. I'm logging off, calling it done. I will talk to you again sooner than later. Hopefully, with a Check Your Six podcast tonight after the Collegiate R6 stuff wraps up. So, we'll have more to talk about very, very soon. Later, taters.